My best days
Yes.
are not behind me. My best days are ever before me. That's a faith-based statement based on the position of faith that what God is bringing me into is always going to ultimately end up better than what I had to go through. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spirit in Mind, where we discuss current affairs with faith and mental health perspectives. I am Bishop Guy Robinson, and it is great to be with you today, and great to have my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Shepard, with us today as well. Hello, Dr. Shepard.
Yes, thank you, Bishop, and hello to all of our listening audience. It's great to be here on another episode of Spirit in Mind. We're looking forward to an active discussion, engaging discussion, and please make sure that you tune in to all of our episodes that we have lined up for you all. You don't want to miss one.
Absolutely. And I think today we're talking again about another subject that certainly is relevant to these times we live in. In fact, the hymn writer said, time is filled with swift transition. And holding on to God's unchanging hand is such a major part of being able to do what we're going to talk about today. And I'm also reminded of John Steinbeck, the American author, who said, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And so today we're talking about living with broken plans. And so if you know anyone, or perhaps you're going through some things that have changed, and if you're a planner and things have gone a little differently than you planned, whether it be in a relatively smaller way, or even if it's talking about the bigger picture of life and where life has you at this point and stage in your experience, then we want you to let someone know and share this even with them because we believe it will be helpful. So we're going to get started, and Dr. Shepard's going to do our introduction, and then we'll continue to talk about this subject of living with broken plans.
So, as you just heard Bishop allude to and introduce living with broken plans, I am a planner. And I'll be honest with you, when plans are broken, it disappoints me. And I know that there are those who are listening that you may be in the same boat that I am in. And when you're living with broken plans, this is where we want to talk about how to succeed, how to maintain, how to be able to go forward when those plans are broken. We are living in a time where we have so many cuts, massive job cuts, layoffs, federal government. I work in DC, and we are seeing unprecedented cuts. We're seeing cuts to services that typically are available to people. We're now experiencing people with job notices that they no longer could work. And even for those who may have to come back, they're no longer able to work in the same environment. There's been salary cuts. You're looking at academic institutions where you once thought that you could get an education for a certain or during a certain amount of time, where you're uncertain now that if you're a person who was born in a different country from the United States of America, if you can finish your program now. You're not sure if you're going to be able to hold on to a job if it has a certain title. If you work in academic institutions where you receive grants, you've actually had to change nomenclature. You've actually had to change bylaws. And let me tell you, working with these persons who have had to endure these changes, it's heavy. It's heavy even as I describe it, because there's just so much that's happening. And not just with those particular incidents, we have people who are incurring sickness. We cannot forget about people who are incurring sicknesses. There's cancer, there's heart disease, there's diabetes, and you get a notice one day that your lifespan could be cut short. I've dealt with various friends recently that have received notices from doctors. They're fine. a few months ago, and now they're receiving a notice that their life could end on this earth in 6 months. That's a broken plan because you had different things that you were looking to or planning to do within those 6 months, and now you take a hard left pivot, a hard left turn. Those are just some of the broken plans. We're dealing with uncertainty in our financial institutions, tariffs. I know that's a big bad word, the big bad T word, tariffs and cost of goods and inflation. These are just some of the broken plans that we're learning how to maintain. So my job right now is just to help us to put some real life application to what we're talking about today, living with these broken plans. And as we go through this, we're going to talk about how to be able to maintain, how to be able to move forward, how to be able to heal. There's a few groups of people that I want to even identify before Bishop goes forward. There are some people who are looking to have their wounds mended, who need to have wounds mended because of the broken plans, because of the things that have happened. There are people who need to have friendships, marriages, partnerships. They've been offended, the hurt that goes along with it, the disrespect, the disappointment, the distrust. There are people who are grief stricken. Again, you were not expecting this thing to happen to where you lost a loved one, you lost a job, you might not be able to even have activity of your limbs like you used to. And then there's another group of people who find themselves numb because of the undesired and unexpected outcome. So we're going to address those people too. And then we're also going to think about those persons and speak directly to those people who may have quietly quit. And figure out when those broken plans occur. You might say, I'm out of here. I'm done. Y'all can have it, as they say. So these are just some of the groups of people that as we walk through this, we want to help to figure out how to be able to help you and how to help you to be able to move forward with this.
Absolutely. So as you hear, listen, life is basically, as we said, the hymn writer, life is basically filled with change, and the Greek philosopher Epictetus said, "Change is the only constant." But with that in mind, it's just great to help develop some mindsets. I want to say that change is something we live with, and so peace is not. I often say peace is not necessarily the absence of conflict as much as it is the presence of healthy coping skills. And so too would it apply to change that seems to disrupt our peace of mind, if you will. So change, dealing with change, because the ideal life is not the life that is totally within our ability to control, but it is in being able to cope with the things that happen that are beyond our control. You heard several examples of that, whether it is what you're hearing really is there are some relational aspects to change. There's scientific aspects to change. You plan something and then the weather didn't cooperate. That's a change. That's scientific and meteorological associated reasons for change. And then there are relational things. That's what we find a lot. Especially in the work of ministry. Think you plan it out, you plan out all of these events and in organizations, period, inclusive of faith-based organizations. But you plan out these things and in the work of ministry, actually, where statistically it still shows that somewhere between 50 and 75% of workers in church are volunteer staff. Even for the so-called mega churches, still rely on volunteer staff to provide anywhere from 50 to 75% of the work. It's persons who oftentimes have other responsibilities, other things, had to work overtime, plans change, flights change, guests you invited didn't make it, all those kind of things. And so, again, these things are very common, as the scriptures say, common unto man. But here's the critical question: how do we cope with that? And usually, as we get into that, it's usually some perhaps even some association with some earlier experiences, childhood experiences, and we all do that on the existential level. As children, we say what we're going to do. We start planning our lives out, even on the childhood level. I remember saying, "When I grow up, I'm going to be an astronaut." That's making plans, at least as I comprehend life as a child. And then as we grow and the conditions change and we grow psychosocially and developmentally, those plans change to something else. I remember going from an astronaut to a journalist, and then from a journalist to something else. And so we go through these changes. And I say that because in providing pastoral care to a number of persons, oftentimes what comes up persons who are, hit that 35, maybe 40 years old, you say, I just thought I thought I would be at an entirely different place in life at this point. When I was 20, I really saw myself here, or I didn't see myself divorced at 35 years old, or I didn't see myself not married at 35 years old. And so life, or as you alluded to with the government workers, I didn't see myself at this stage in my life. I mean, I had a pretty secure job, and here I am again trying to go to interviews and market myself in another generation. Um,
Mhm.
these are real circumstances, and so we want to talk about those. We want to address those issues, but we also want to talk about what may be some perhaps coping strategies to effectively deal with them. Dr. Shepard.
Yeah, and there's a quote, Bishop, and I know you love quotes, and about Alvin Tolliver that says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn."
Absolutely.
I'll say that one more time, and then I will pick apart how that applies here. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Well, Shep, you might say, well, how does that apply to living with broken plans? Well, it applies because, as Bishop just stated, if you are encountering now a situation where you have to go back on a job interview, you thought you were in a secure job. And most people who are in governmental jobs, you thought that it was safe, secure. I won't say I've got it made, but you knew that it was going to be there stable, and be there for you. But now we find that the things that we thought were stable, we find on very shaky ground, a lot of instability. And one of the things that we want to share with you is that when you find yourself like that, you got to make that pivot to say, what can I learn in this situation? What is it that I need to learn? What does I need to unlearn? And what do I need to do to relearn? And so that's exactly what that quote is stating right there. It's so impactful to me. And I think about that when I find myself stuck in a rut and feel like that I have to be so rigid that nothing can happen to my plan. And then that quote pops up in my head to say, "Shut, wait a minute. You got to make sure that you're not boxing yourself in to where you cannot unlearn, relearn, and actually learn again how to be able to handle yourself when the plan does not go your way." In addition to that, Bishop, there is a statement, and I really think that these statements can help be a launching pad as we go further into this discussion. There's some key phrases that I want to remind people that you are one decision away from changing your life. You're one decision away from changing your life. Now, again, how does that apply? When you are now dealt with the broken plan of unexpected outcome, and you find yourself numb, and again, I've been there. I'm even there now, working within my government job. We're finding ourselves at a place now where money is tight because the federal grants the federal money and resources that we typically are allotted, they're no longer there. And a lot of people are numb. They don't know what to do. They're stuck. And what I have to remind myself before I can tell anybody else, I have to remind myself, I have to make a decision each and every single day that I wake up that I'm going to move toward a place where I'm no longer at, where I'm disappointed, where I'm disgusted, where I find myself distrusting people. And Bishop, we may want to deal with how do we help those people who find themselves there, because that's a bad place to find yourself. You might say, well, Ship, I hear you. Um, you're one decision away from changing your life, but I can't even make my mind up. When when the plans are broken, you'll find yourself in that state of despair and chaos. And I know we've talked about that. Some of the things that we're experiencing has been very intentional, has been intentional to set us up to feel like that. It's been the intentionality of plans to set us up to feel like we are in chaos, and not feel like we are in chaos or confusion. Um, yeah, that that's not a good feeling to have. And so when you say one decision away from changing your life, I want to speak to those persons. You've grown bitter, you're frustrated, you're angry. And when you stay in that state too long, you'll become numb and desensitized to all the actions around you. So I want to encourage, I want to put that statement out there. You are one decision away from changing your life. And maybe, Bishop, there's something that we can tell the people. What is it that they can do to help make that decision?
As well, we can begin. Let's begin with a theological framework or foundation, um, um, if you will. That's where it becomes so very important to have a faith based orientation that allows us to reframe the narratives of our experiences. Joseph did that, for example, when he said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's him finding a way to frame his experiences in a way that make it possible to embrace help and hope. And so one of the things to connect that to what you just said, Dr. Shepherd, that we have to do is reframe some narratives that we may have in terms of our internal dialogue. For example, we can learn, unlearn, and relearn. To go through that process, we have to have an existing narrative that says it's not too late for me to learn, for me to improve. And I say that because a lot of times we have some sayings in our colloquial expressions in our culture. You can't teach an old dog new tricks and those kind of things. You have to have some faith that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And a part of that being diligently made includes a brain with a remarkable ability to change and adapt. Neuroplasticity for you nerds.
Yeah.
But you have to believe in the ability for me to change. And psychosocially, that change and opportunities to grow happen throughout my lifespan. So that even in my 50s or 60s, there's things that I can do that still make me marketable, maybe not in the same way. So if I lost this job and I have to start again, I'm maybe not in the same way, but there's still ways. I've acquired wisdom. I can be a consultant. But that kind of optimistic look is a very faith-based oriented perspective that embraces the possibility, and to say, well, God is taking me in another direction. And so I just wanted to say, to start there, because oftentimes when I'm providing pastoral care to persons, part of my assignment is to help them reframe that narrative in a way that makes help and hope more viable options. The scriptures do it, and I'll close with that to get us started. That's the significance psychosocially of Paul saying to things to the church like um, uh, whatsoever think on these things. You know, because your negative thoughts and your ruminations are affecting your outcome. So he says, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are pure. He says, think on these things as opposed to those things, because this way of thinking plays a critical role in enabling the peace of God to guard your hearts and minds, which is a powerful phrase, because what he's saying spiritually is that there's a faith component in which God provides some things that are really otherwise inexplicable or not otherwise specified, that acts as a bouncer, if you will. He says, guard your heart and mind, that guard your heart and mind against certain unproductive and even self-destructive thought patterns. So it begins with allowing those things. And I said I was closing my head this. So when I say faith, I want to emphasize the fact that this kind of faith, the kind of faith without which Hebrews 11 says it is impossible to please God, this kind of faith is always looking forward with optimism and expectation. It always does. So it rebukes, if you will, or reproves that narrative that my heyday is behind me. My heyday, in terms of this kind of faith, is never behind me. My heyday is always, that's what my dad used to call it. So younger people going like, what? Well, my best days are not behind me. My best days are ever before me. That's a faith-based statement based on the position of faith that what God is bringing me into is always going to ultimately end up better than what I had to go through. Even if this earthly tabernacle is destroyed, we have a better home. That's saying that even the end of this life is not the cessation of my life. So that kind of faith, that's the great hope of the gospel. That kind of faith always says, now, what I'm going through now, it's not spiritually bypassing, because it's acknowledging that what I'm going through now is hurtful, it's difficult, I'm going through changes, I may need to talk to somebody about it to help me get through it. I'm acknowledging that, but I'm also acknowledging that the suffering of the present time is not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be future-oriented, revealed, because I'm not denying the difficulty now, but this kind of faith always says that what's ahead of me is going to be better. And that kind of hope gives us the determination to make it through when things get broken and plans change.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at Spirit in Mind, and we're also on Instagram at Spirit in Mind Live. Join us next time for a new episode of Spirit in Mind.